everyone. Welcome back to Cryptoria. I'm the co-host Vivian.
This is Jian.
On episode 61, we talked about two protocols that inherited of Meta legacy, which are Sui and Optus. Last month, we've been invited to Shenzhen for MoveCon by Sui team. Honestly speaking, Jian, that is my first time to participate into Move ecosystem.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's pretty impressive because first of all, we haven't participated any activity in mainland China, and secondly, it's the first time we participate activity other than Ethereum. So yeah, it's really amazing and see all the people and friends there.
Yeah, so the experience is so good because, I wasn't expected too much before I go because I know Sui mainly because of me. So it's full of speculations, bump and dumps, and gossip. And after that conference, I just feel the builder vibe. So I just think that is a very I don't know how to describe it, but I think that is hacker cultures. The hacker culture is really the universal one. It's despite which ecosystem you are in. And after that, it's really triggered my curiosity about who is leadership of Sui and what's the strategies they are going to use and how they plan to success on this competitive layer one market. So today, we are very honored to invite Sam Blackshear, the co-founder and CTO from Mysten Lab, to join us today. So always great to have you, Sam, and thank you very much to join us today.
Thanks, Vivian, and thanks, Xian. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about Move, Sui, Mysten, Walrus, all the things we're working on.
Right. So you work in Meta, right? Now, previously it's Facebook, and you're really instrumental in creating Move at Novi. How did this experience shape your approach to blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk about both creating Move at Novi, Facebook, and then also like leading up to that. So I started off my career as a programming languages researcher. I did a PhD studying automated bug finding tools, and then after finishing my PhD, I worked in developer tools at Facebook for many years, working on a tool called Infer that worked on finding bugs in mobile apps like null references, buffer overflows, and we did some security analysis to try to find, in Facebook backend products, like there's a web request, like it shouldn't go directly to the database without sanitization. And so from that, I had a lot of experience with what kind of bugs people write, how programming languages set people up to write bugs, how programming languages help programmers write correct code, and it's just a lot of opinions about ways that these sorts of things should be done and shouldn't be done. And so when I joined the Libra project, I had the mandate to lead the smart contracts effort, and there's an opportunity to create a new language basically based on a lot of those opinions I'd had from my past experience at Facebook and my experience as an academic. So that's where Move came from, looking at Solidity, studying the code, seeing what are the security problems that are happening, what are programmers trying to do, where is the language helping them, where is it getting in their way, and just trying to think really hard about, okay, if you want a language that does these sorts of things, that's for programming with assets, for having access control, for having strong scarcity and ownership, what would that look like? How would it be different from conventional languages? How is it different from Solidity? And that's where the idea of Move comes from. Even the name, it's about having objects or assets, they move between people. It's also a sort of play on this programming languages joke of move semantics. So yeah, I was very influenced, I think, from my academic and professional background, and then that was sort of my path into crypto as well from the languages angle, but eventually got much deeper into other areas as well.
Okay, so what was the moment that convinced you to take the leap from Meta to co-found Mysten Labs? What was the trigger point?
Yeah, it was a very gradual thing where, we at Libra, we worked on, built Move, built and designed the Libra blockchain, integrated them together. And then I ended up being on this research team that was working some on the Libra core product, but also looking at what are some of the limitations of Libra and how can we build sort of next generation research prototypes that address issues with Libra scalability, issues with issues with programmability, issues with the cool cryptography that we wanted to have. And so through that, I got to know Kostas, George, Evan, Adonit, the guys who I ended up co-founding Mysten with. And we developed a really good working relationship. We did many different projects together. We had these different areas of expertise, but had enough overlap that we really respected each other and worked really well. So we're always sort of we can't even get this first thing out the door. Wouldn't it be great to take some of the more advanced things and get those out there? But no, we got to launch this. And so I would say that combined with the fact that Libra was encountering this regulatory pushback, it seemed unlikely to launch, sort of eventually got to a point where, the pull of trying to get the most exciting work that we were currently doing out the door, combined with the low probability of the existing work getting out the door. I was like, okay, now's the time. That time was late 2021, where we hopped it up to found Mysten and start designing and building Sui.
Cool. So you just mentioned about you was an academic researcher. As the researchers and turn into the founders, how was your day-to-day life changed? I know being founder, being entrepreneur is exhausting. And so how's your days? What's been the biggest adjustment of your life?
Yeah, it's a very different job. So as a researcher, your job is all about depth, and it's usually depth on one particular problem or one area. And so, when I was on Libra or when I was an academic before, I would spend days and weeks and months like really focusing and going deep on one particular problem. And as a founder, like I'm usually solving many, many different problems a day, but usually not at the same level of depth. And so that can be great because there's a lot of variety in your day. Like one, you might be doing a hard technical problem at one point, and then you're doing a company management problem or sort of a relationships problem next, and then back to technical work. And I do still sometimes get to do really deep technical work as well, not usually for like months interrupted at a time, but get better at doing it on the back burner. So it's different, but I think the main thing is you just have to get a lot better at multitasking, but also, the variety of things you do in your day, they complement each other. I think you learn a lot from doing different kinds of work and working with different kinds of people. And so I've really enjoyed the experience, even though it can be intense.
Could you walk us through your typical one day as a CTO and co-founder of Mysten Lab? What's your typical day look like?
Yeah, so backing up to what I think my sort of responsibilities or the important things for me to do are. So I think first and foremost is working with the Sui developer community, helping projects that are doing really well do extremely well, because I think that's where big hits in developer platforms come from. It's always like the one or two breakout apps you want. Also a lot of like working with projects that are just getting started, collecting feedback, sort of working with them on ideas. That's one pillar of the things that I would do. And then on the flip side, like, at Mysten Labs, I work with our tech leads, our engineers on design problems that they have, sort of maybe taking some of that feedback that I'm getting from the community, trying to think about like what are the things we should be focusing on, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months from now, making sure that we're prepared for that, as well as like, sort of polish and making sure that what we put out there in terms of code, in terms of documentation, in terms of the system itself is really good. And also spend a lot of time looking at dashboards, data, understanding how the network is doing. Are things running normally? What can we learn about that? What does that tell us about how we should change our design work? So it's a mix of those sorts of things, which some meetings, so in terms of like what I'm actually doing, it's like lots of meetings, a lot of reading docs, lots of writing docs, sometimes slides and presentations, sometimes podcasts. It's a very good mix in terms of both like the content and the format, I would say.
So just curious, like when did you normally wake up?
Well, let's see. We have a lot of colleagues in Europe, so I'm usually up at like 6:15 or 6:30 or something, and then taking meetings. Like,
and then
pretty soon
you head to the gym?
What's that? Gym. I like running and surfing for exercise, and so surfing is best early in the morning before it's too windy, and running is like afternoon or lunchtime or just whenever there's space in the day.
Right, and then how long will you normally work? Like 8 hours or 9 hours? Because we talked to some like tech co-founder, they work crazily, like relentlessly working.
Yeah, I don't measure it like that. Like I think by some metrics it would be like all the time, because like sometimes it's very focused work, like sitting down at your keyboard, very actively working on a document or something. But even when you're recreating, like a lot of times, like I'll check messages, I'll reply to a few things. So I think one answer would be like all non-sleeping hours. So I don't
24/7.
17 hours a day. But I think a more realistic answer would probably be like 10 hours a day or something like this. It's important to work hard and grind, but it's also like these are long journeys. Like the journey as an entrepreneur, like you can't just use all your energy in one spurt and be done. Like this is a decades-long project, and it's also like, yeah, if you're tired all the time, a lot of things you do, it's important to have a lot of energy with the people you're speaking with, or to be able to think deep thoughts and these sorts of things. So that's a balance too, to try to make sure that you're always grinding, but you're never, you always have the energy when you need it.
Yeah. So your title is a co-founder and a CTO. So obviously you're responsible for all the technology involvement. So how do you balance the demands being both technical leaders and the co-founder?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky in two ways. One is that I have 4 other co-founders. 5 co-founders is quite a lot, so that's a lot of people to share responsibility with in terms of the co-founder duties. And the other thing is that the most important thing for you as a founding team, your most important job is hiring, always. And I think both, I think we've worked very hard at hiring an excellent team and also been very lucky in just that we've been able to attract great people. So I think it's especially now, like several years in, we have an amazing leadership team. We have amazing engineering leads and engineers throughout the stack. So it's just super easy to plug in and do the things that I do best and let other people take care of the things that they knew much better than me or that I'm not the most interested in doing. And so I definitely do some of both, but I think it's not too much of a challenge to be both a technical leader and a co-founder, just because like we have our responsibilities segmented such that like that is my job. So it's what I'm able to spend most of my time doing, whether it's being a technical leader in the Sui community or within Mysten.
So you just mentioned you like the running and the surfing. So does any hobbies except all the blockchain technology sort of things? Does any interest or the hobbies that you have?
Yeah, those are the two big ones. So I've been a runner for most of my life. Like I ran in college, and I used to do marathons and trail races, and that's how my wife and I met. And then a couple years ago.
How many stars you've got? How many marathon stars you've got?
Too many. And then we got into surfing quite a few years ago, and I live in San Francisco, which is a great place for surfing. Most vacations would also be surf focused, so yeah, we're really into that these days. Both of those are just great activities in terms of you can really let your mind float free. Sometimes it'll solve problems that you weren't able to figure out otherwise, and just a great way to connect to nature and just do something very different from sitting in front of a keyboard and a monitor. San Francisco is a beautiful place for running as well.
Yeah, because we live in Sydney, so we always go to the beach and just to see the people surfing and just think, and even just seeing the people surfing, we just think we relived a lot of the things.
Have you tried it?
I want to try, but I never. I know because it's really, honestly speaking, it's quite dangerous. I just think in Sydney because Sydney they always have the shark in the near of the shore, and they don't have any protections about how to protecting the shark away from people. So, and there has a lot of the accident about the shark to attacking surfers. So I'm quite curious about that.
That sounds harrowing, but if you ever visit here, we mostly don't have that problem. Have extra wetsuits and always getting to trying to help people try it out if they're
yeah, definitely. That is one of on my to-do list that I want to learn how to surf.
Every time I talk to people I haven't met before, I'm trying to get them to build on Sui if it makes sense or go surfing. So you've been a bit I'll get the build on Sui thing later.
Okay, actually, when you talk about Sui again, what actually excites you the most about the future of blockchain?
Yeah, so for me, the most interesting thing about blockchains, and especially like what they offer compared to developer platforms of today, is this kind of radical interoperability, where if you think about the web or mobile or sort of any developer platform today, the way everything works is that everyone's building these standalone APIs that have standalone databases behind them. They do what they do. They return data in the database. They might do computations over the database. But as soon as your app wants to talk with my app or interoperate with my app or connect with it, things become very, very difficult because there's different data under the hood. We didn't talk to each other probably when we were building the app. So it's just like this giant effort and these walls between them. And I think what's different about blockchains in general and about Sui especially is that you sort of get interoperability by default, or at least it's greatly facilitated. All apps have the same database. They have a set of move data types that are in common. If you want your app to use things that come from mine, you just include your data types and your function signatures, and then you're off to the races. And so I think that lets you do a lot of things that have to do with collaboration. So like obviously we talk a lot about money and payments. That's one thing where it's like, you declare coin types, and then your app uses my coin type, and then you're done with it. But I think like seeing the creative things that developers want to do with that, and whether it's like incorporating financial elements into their apps, whether it's just like having apps that are more like built on top of each other instead of the standalone thing, is one of the things I'm most excited. I think at the meta level, the thing I'm the most excited about, like seeing how developers are going to create with this new set of primitives compared to other developer platforms. Now, I'll talk to you about like what I'm concretely excited about in terms of Sui in the short term and like the feature set and the big launches that we have. So Walrus is the thing that I think is probably on most of our minds right now. This new decentralized storage system that the research team has been working on for a couple of years now. It's got some really, really interesting technical bits under the hood, as well as having some really nice developer features that we think make it a lot more usable than existing solutions. And also just gives a lot more power to Sui programmers and that they can store data instead of just having like these fairly small objects or expensive storage. So that's one big focus for this year. We have something called the Move registry that's rolling out fairly soon. So this is sort of like NPM or crates.io. It's a package manager for Move, which makes it a lot easier for developers to share code and to build on top of other apps by other developers, which is quite important if we think one of the core value propositions is this radical interoperability. That's like, you can give a name to your package, you add open source code to it, you can see the code that other people have written, you build against it, and it just makes this experience a lot easier. We also have Mystiko-static version 2 coming out. Mystiko-static was a big launch last year, definitely a huge performance increase, and we have a new edition of that's going to be more focused on throughput increases and sort of simplifying the end-to-end client flow. So those are some of the tech elements I'm most excited for, in addition to sort of the big picture excitement.
Okay, so you've talked about Varus. So we do prepare a lot of the Varus questions. Maybe we can just move those questions forwards and we just go a little bit deep about Varus. So what inspired you guys to create this decentralized blob storage network?
Yeah, so we're inspired by developer need, basically. When we created Sui in the first place and had developers working with it, a lot of times they could build what they wanted, but many times they'd be like, hey, I'm doing a creator platform and I have a bunch of like photos that memes that my creators are going to come up with. Like, can I store them as Sui objects? And they're like, well, maybe like how much data are we talking about? It's like, 10 terabytes. It's like, Sui storage is cheap, but it's not cheap enough for that to really make sense. And also, like, you don't need this data to be in a smart contract. It's not like Move needs to read it or write to it. It just needs to be somewhere where a decentralized app can run smart contracts over here and then pull data from over there. And so it's like, okay, it feels like we have this decentralized computer that has RAM and has a CPU but doesn't have a disk. So of course, we should give it a disk. We looked, of course, at Filecoin and Arweave and the other decentralized storage solutions. It's like we could just use those, and we started, playing around with what it actually takes to build an app based on one. And we just had a lot of things where it's like, this actually isn't it's not good enough for an app developer. Like, the read performance isn't going to be good enough. You have to pay for 200 years of storage up front. Maybe you just want to pay for 6 months or something. Maybe you want to delete data. All these things where it's like, when you actually think about how can I use this disk to build things, they become important. And so we did what we often do at Mysten, which is, okay, give this as a problem to the research team. They, they do a bunch of math. They think about different ways to do it. They build a prototype, they publish a paper, they decide whether the prototype is sort of good enough to move to production, and then sort of go from there. So that's the idea basically came from developer needs, and then sort of turned into a research project where we're like, can we have a good solution to this problem? And I think we really do, because the team did amazing work.
You just compared the Varus to the Filecoin. Could you explain in the plain words, just like nobody understands the technology things, just in the plain words, what is technical architecture of Varus and how the Varus token will function in the ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're trying to build a storage system of any kind, decentralized or not decentralized, like, one thing you're going to worry about is, okay, I have my file, I'm going to go store it on a computer. Now, what happens if that computer, crashes or gets hacked or like something goes wrong? That would be bad. Now my data's lost. I'm a not very happy customer. And so something you do in either a centralized or decentralized storage system is you have what's called replication, where it's you want to take the file and you're going to store on multiple computers, and now you've got some redundancy. One data center burns down, that's okay. I've got a copy of the file somewhere else. I'm going to be okay. And so what Varus is doing compared to Filecoin, these other systems, is it's trying to provide the optimal level of protection in terms of redundancy while minimizing the redundant storage overhead. So backing up a second, the problem with redundancy is that if I have my file that's 10 gigabytes and I store on two computers, now, that's 20 gigabytes worth of storage that I have to pay for instead of just 10. And then now you want it to be decentralized. There's going to be 100 nodes, 1,000 nodes. The way Filecoin and Arweave and these other systems work is now I'm replicating 1,000 times. That's a lot of overhead on top of my fairly small file size, and so the cost is very high. And so the technical breakthrough that Varus has is that for Varus, it has replicated file storage, but the overhead is X the file no matter how many nodes you have, X the file size no matter how many nodes you have. And the way it does that is, instead of doing the straightforward thing of I'm going to take the file and I'm going to store it in every machine. It uses this fancy technique called erasure coding, where it splits the file into these chunks, and it uses some very fancy math of error correcting codes to be like, well, I can split these chunks among the nodes, and even if I lose some of the chunks, I can still recover the other ones. And they sort of figure out like what is exactly the minimum number of chunks I can store so that I get the robustness guarantees I need without having to pay this big overhead. So that lets Walrus be a lot faster in terms of read performance. It makes the replication factor lower, which allows cost to be lower. And then we add in all these nice programmability features that I was mentioning. So that's sort of the architecture, I would say, difference or like an interesting thing about Walrus.
Cool. So I checked some data about Walrus. And that data really surprised me. The developer preview was already storing 22 TBs of data. And honestly speaking, because I'm not from tech background, so I just think that is really huge, the huge storage size. So is that surprised you? Or let's change the question. So what has surprised you the most about how developers are using the Walrus?
Yeah, so the amount stored isn't a surprise to me. We know we can do a lot more. And in some ways, like a decentralized storage system is easier than a smart contract system. There's just fewer moving pieces. Or, just the API is smaller. Like you read the data, you write the data, there's some stuff like deletion. But, a smart contract platform is hugely complicated. So that part isn't surprising. And I think in Walrus mainnet, like we'll see lots more data stored, I think. So in terms of what's been surprising to me is, I think a thing about Walrus is that the data, like any decentralized system, like it's all public, and that's sort of the point. Like you put the bytes out there, anyone can read them back. This is great for public data sets like the Library of Congress or, your Wikipedia. But of course, like for a lot of commercial applications, privacy and confidentiality are going to be very important. And I think like one of the things we weren't sure about is how many use cases look like the public data set versus like need some sort of privacy or confidentiality. And I think we're like, oh, actually a lot of them are going to be comfortable with using Walrus for privacy and confidentiality, but that creates this different set of problems for how to do encryption and decryption, how to do access control, how to set that up so that you can do it from a Move smart contract, how it interacts with the wallet layer, how it interacts with the RPC layer. And so we sort of, the same way we built Walrus by having these developer needs about storage, now where we have this idea of another system for encryption and decryption and access control management that's sort of built on top of Walrus and Sui from that. So that's something that we'll be working on after Walrus so that we can accommodate these use cases that need privacy really well.
So previously you just talked about a lot of the Walrus and you touched based on the security side and about privacy. And is Walrus going to address the common challenge of decentralized storage, just like the data availabilities and the cost effectiveness?
Yes, it'll absolutely address both of those. So in the cost effectiveness, we spoke a little bit about like minimizing the replication factor and just being 5x the file size. So there it's like, I think that's going to be as good as it can possibly be in terms of cost. In terms of what that translates to in terms of monetary costs, we think it's something like 50 cents per gigabyte per year, which is quite competitive in terms of decentralized storage, way cheaper than any other blockchain for sure, and competitive to the existing decentralized storage solutions, and not crazily more expensive than depending on what kind of centralized storage solution you're using either. And then in terms of data availability, yes, that's a feature that Walrus has where you can store your data there and you can get a data availability proof. What that is that you can get assurance that the data is there without having to download all of it. Like say I've put my 10 terabyte file there, then I want to know it's 2 years later. Does the network still have it? But I don't want to pay to download or wait to download that whole 10 terabytes. I just, want to get a couple of kilobytes and be pretty sure that the data is still there. So Walrus can do that. It can do proofs of data availability for any blobs that are there. So that means, if you want to do something like a Celestia where, you're storing blobs to facilitate creating Ethereum layer 2s, like you could use Walrus for that as well. So yeah, I think it addresses decentralized data storage in the very general sense to your question.
So I think, because you already mentioned that this year, I'm not sure just this year or the coming year as well, you've completely focused on Walrus. So finger crossed and all the best to Walrus, and let's see how it can benefit all those people in Sui community as well as the developers. So other than Walrus, what I'm curious the most is about Sui. So if we talk about Sui, that Sui made a lot of progress last year. And partly is from the token price. Everybody happy about that skyrocketing to I won't say it's like all-time high, but still like really like significant level of token price, right? So it's from the Mystiko-static consensus mechanism which you integrated the USDC and Sui's token price. That's how it makes really like go sharply. I just want to ask, do you have any thoughts about whether you want to integrate the USDC other than the USDT? Is there any like technical thoughts you're thinking about before you make this decision? Because as you know that USDT has more market share than the USDC. It's more like 60%. And the Circle is only like 20 or 25% only. So what are the thoughts behind these decisions you make?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Like, stablecoins obviously are super important. Like, they're behind so many of the use cases that we see for these big blockchains today. Like, any sort of commerce, a lot of trading, any sort of payments. Yeah, like everyone wants to do it in a stable coin, of course, like not a volatile cryptocurrency. And so, we don't think of it as like picking one or the other or prioritizing one or the other. We want all of the stable coins. Like they address very different audiences. They have different features, they have different on and off ramps. And so we really certainly like USDC was the most prominent stablecoin launch last year, like just in terms of the amount of TVL and the amount of volume that you see on Sui. But we also have FDUSD that just crossed 100 million in TVL today. We have Ondo, we have Agora. Of course, we'd love to see USDT or any other major stables on the platform. It's just, they only expand the audience and the use cases. So like, even though they're all $1, like at the end, as you're saying, like, the market is very split up. So if you have one but not the other, there's a lot of users and use cases that you're missing out of. So definitely we'd like to help.
Okay, so let's talk about the Mystiko-static. Did I pronounce it right? Mystiko-static?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, awesome.
We named all of our protocols after marine mammals. So we've created a lot of protocols at this point. So some of the mammals are rather obscure. Like Mystiko-static is a kind of whale, but I think it's
like the walrus, right? It's also mammals.
Like walrus, yeah. There you go. Yeah.
That is a tradition. I know. Next time the Sui launch the new protocols or new product, we just go for the mammal's name just to check.
Yeah. Just make sure it's a mammal that we're going to get it wrong and pick a fish. Yeah, to keep us honest.
So the Mystiko-static consensus mechanism achieved an 80% reduction in latency, right? So could you walk us through the technical breakthroughs that make this possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the consensus space, there have basically been two different approaches. So one is this so-called leader-based approach, where it's sort of you have a bunch of machines that are participating in consensus, and one is the leader who proposes blocks of transactions, and you basically only make progress when the leader decides to make progress. So this approach is really good for latency because the leader is just sitting there churning out. There's not a very long wait. You send your transaction to the leader includes it in a block. It gets committed, you're sort of done. But it's not as good for throughput because you've got hundreds, thousands, whatever of nodes in the network, and there's one that's, they can actually do something. The other ones are just signing off on the work of the leader. And then the other one is these DAG-based methods where instead of transactions going to one entity, like all validators can submit transactions. But then the catch is that, if a bunch of validators are submitting transactions and signing off on others, like how do you figure out when something is actually committed? So this approach is super good for throughput because you have so many folks submitting transactions at once, but less good for latency because it takes a long time for the tangled web of validators sending messages to converge and actually, get a commit of anything. And so prior to Mystiko-static, we were using a different DAG-based approach that sort of had these trade-offs. And Mystiko-static is the first protocol that's sort of getting the best of both worlds. And the trick that it's using is something where it's a DAG-based protocol. And in most of these DAG-based protocols, you have a concept of certification where you're a validator and you say, hey, here's a block of transactions. I'm going to send it off to a bunch of other validators. And they'll say, yeah, that looks like a good block of transactions to me. I'll sign it and send it back. They collect those in what's called a certificate, and then you rebroadcast the certificate. But all of those rounds of messages back and forth, that takes 6 so-called message rounds, round trips around the world in a globally distributed network, and that takes a long time. And so what Mystiko-static figured out how to do was to use an uncertified DAG to skip that certification step without sacrificing the validation guarantees that you get from it. And so it lowers the latency to the theoretical minimum, 3 message rounds, only 3 trips around the world. And so that's just, that's a lot shorter in a globally distributed network. And that's how we got this giant reduction in latency. And so it's a great day to ship the protocol. Everyone has the same apps, the same code, and just everything gets faster magically. You see the nice drop in the graph and everyone is very pumped. So, that was a great accomplishment by the team, both theory-wise and end-wise.
All right. You know what? Prior to our interview, actually, I asked DeepSeek, the AI. Now it's become really famous. What is famous for, like, Sam Blackshear? Like, do you know what actually it gave it to me. One of it is called Sam Blackshear, a quote, right? Sam Blackshear is famous for simplify complicated technical concepts. And then one of the interviews the AI introduced is like you once compare the Solidity and Move as the food court in a shopping mall and a buffet. Yeah. Is that right? Is that right? Because I read it in Chinese. I'm not quite sure whether I translated it properly. So could you actually, go through this kind of like an analogy again to our audience?
Yeah, that is correct. So this was specifically about a feature of Sui called programmable transaction blocks, or PTBs, in contrast to call them single call transactions in something like Solidity. So I'll explain what I was talking about there. So in a typical transaction in Solidity, or basically I think in any blockchains except for Sui and maybe Solana, you have a transaction and it'll say like, hey, it's me, I'm Vivian, I'm the sender, and here's a smart contract function that I'd like to call, and here's the arguments to that function. And then processing that transaction is, okay, I call that one function, I record the results, and I'm done. So this sort of feels like, and so say you're a customer of the blockchain and you want to do 10 different things. Well, what you're going to have to do is you already know you want to do 10 different things, but you have to sign one transaction, call the function that does the one thing, call the, do it for the second one, do it for the third one, and so on and so on. It takes a long time. And if you wanted to do these things atomically, like, maybe you wanted to make a trade on one place and then make a trade on another one with the proceeds, like, things might change in between and you might be upset about that. So that's the mall food court part, where it's like at the mall food court, say you are very hungry and you want to try all the delights that the mall has to offer. First, you have to go to the pizza place and you get your pizza. Now you decide like you want to get some Cinnabon, delicious Cinnabon. You have to go, you wait in the line, you swipe your credit card each time, and you'll do that at all the different food stalls where you want to get something. So with programmable transaction blocks, it's more like the buffet, where instead of only being able to call one function, you can call over 1,000, up to 1024. And so if you want to do a bunch of things at once, well, you can be a little bit of a glutton, kind of like you would at a buffet. You call this function, it returns some results, you pipe them into the next function, maybe it pipes its results to another function that happens 10 later, and you can build these very complicated transactions on the fly. So that's like being in the buffet, and it's like, hey, I'm going to have some meatballs, but also I've decided I want some steak, and, why not? I'll have salad. And you swipe your credit card once and you do all these things, the whole world is yours. So that's that metaphor. And yeah, it's something that's been really powerful for Sui developers, because they don't have to anticipate in the smart contract up front everything that a user might want to do. They can sort of mix and match the functionality from different smart contracts on the fly, reading real world data. Another analogy I like to use for this is sort of Expedia, or like your favorite travel aggregator, where it's like you can go and buy the airline ticket here and buy the hotel here and get the rental car here. Or there's this aggregator that's like, hey, you're going to take a trip to Shanghai. Like, you're probably going to need all those things. Like, let me package them together and get the best prices for you. And PTBs make it really easy to do that, because they just look at one smart contract they say, oh, there's a smart contract for the hotels, there's another for the car, or whatever else, and they can sort of do these calculations on the fly with these prices, whereas that would be very hard to do elsewhere. So yeah, that's the buffet and the food court.
The food court.
That is really good metaphor. Last time we do our previous episode to talk about the Sui and Aptos, and we give a lot of the numbers about how quick the Sui can make, and how many transactions and that Sui per second the Sui can make. And we just think, okay, that is really only some numbers. It looks so serious, and it's really convincing numbers. But today, you give us a really good metaphors. I want to learn from you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like the food court.
Yeah, I do.
I'm glad DeepSeek knows about the metaphors. That's funny.
Let's move to Sui's cross-chain strategies. That part is my favorite part. So I know Sui integrates with the Circle USDC and the CCTP, the cross-chain transfer protocols. So that strategy is very significant for the Sui ecosystem. So how do you see these integrations is impacting Sui's cross-chain strategy?
Yeah, this is crucially important for us, right? Because we're somewhat late to the game in some sense. Like, other blockchains have been around for a long time, have large user bases, large TVL, and so bridges are, the metaphor works there. The bridges that let assets and therefore basically users flow across and try out new chains in a hurry instead of being stuck where they are. So CCTP is obviously huge for this, because you can take your native USDC on a different chain and move it to Sui without having to pay bridge fees or worry about the security of bridges. So that's a huge part of the cross-chain strategy. Now dollars can move across chains super easily. Not all assets are going to have that. So to try to make that work almost as nicely for some other assets, we built a native bridge for Sui that's operated by the Sui validators and has the same security as the Sui chain itself. It's a native bridge to Ethereum. And so there, it's really easy to move ETH or to move wrapped Bitcoin just as of a couple days ago, actually, or other assets like USDT. We don't have native USDT yet, so that it moves via the native bridge. So that's an important part as well. And they're also great bridge partners, like Wormhole connects to Solana and a bunch of other chains. We have Axelar coming soon who connects to 60 plus chains. So it's definitely an important part to be able to talk to everything else that's out there and let liquidity move back and forth.
So the last question about technologies, I want to delegate to AI. I know yeah, AI is definitely the big narratives of this year, I think in the future for a long time. I know that Sui has a partnership with the Google Cloud, right? So could you elaborate how the Google Cloud collaborations can enhance Sui's AI capabilities?
Yeah, Google are great partners, so that helps in a few ways. So one is that they have big table instances with a lot of the historical Sui data or Sui RPC data. So that's really great, well, both for RPC providers in the ecosystem, but also for folks who are trying to scrape that data for training or have AI that wants to delegate to that data set in function calling. Also, of course, they have their Gemini series of models. We have a bunch of AI coding tools that we're working on, that the community is working on. Gemini is very competitive as one of the models that gets used there. We usually build it in a model agnostic way, so you can try out whatever. But I think Gemini definitely is getting better at understanding Move, which is important because it's already very far ahead on the JavaScript and Python and these more popular languages. So working closely with the Google team on the data sets and just helping Sui stuff be accessible from Google, I think has been a boon to the community and will continue to be.
So does Sui going to embed some AI features in the future?
Yeah, so for developer tools, we have some things today. The biggest one is we've been working on an AI auditor or security tool that we call Bugdar. So this we only have internally so far, but we'd like to release it to the community soon, where it runs on a PR and it's just a very picky, security-oriented colleague that has seen a lot of smart contract-based bugs and knows what to look for and can call out things that maybe a human reviewer might miss or to do it faster. And so we really hope, I don't think human auditors are going anywhere, but with tools like the ones I used to work on, static analysis tools, verification tools, security-focused AI tools that have LLMs in the hood, we really hope we can make auditing cheaper, make it faster, and just have folks able to do more of it on their own and only use the human experts for the very hardest stuff. So it's something we're invested in a lot, as well as integration with AI frameworks like Eliza. We have folks on our team that work on that and are pretty pumped to play around with these on-chain agents and all the crazy experiments that they're doing. There's a cool team in the Sui community called Talus that's doing a lot of that has agentic frameworks and Move and is doing a lot of interesting experiments. They have something called AI Bay, which is sort of AI
Bay.
Yeah, AI Bay.
AI best friend. Okay.
BAE, yeah, exactly. They're doing some with all this stuff, right? It's so early. I think a lot of these things are just fun experiments, and some of it's silly, but you don't know what's going to work and what could really turn into something. So yeah, a lot of that, we're very much leaning into that.
Right. So since we can talk about the AI, right? Actually, I heard one of the podcast episode from A16Z, and they actually said that the AI is more like top down, while blockchain is bottom up. So it's always about the argument between decentralization and centralization. Right. So as a tech and also the CTO of Mysten Lab, what's your thoughts about or how to balance this decentralized and centralized in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely use cases for both, and even within AI, people have these debates, right? There's the DeepSeeks and llamas versus the closed models. Then there's also open source versus open weights and all of these things. So I think each is going to have their place. Let me put it like this. Everything starts off centralized. There's someone or some small group that has an idea. There are benefits for moving quickly, for being cohesive. And then decentralization is important where something, maybe it doesn't need to move quite as fast, or maybe the trust aspect is more important than the velocity aspect. And so I think a platform like Sui gives you tools to decentralize your application, your asset, your platform, and to do that in a progressive way if you'd like to, or to like to give one concrete example, because this can be very abstract, we have this tool called closed loop tokens. So it's like a normal token, but the issuer just has a lot of control over what can be done with it. Like you can't take a closed loop token and go trade it on a DEX, for example. It just doesn't work like that. The issuer can set whatever restrictions they want on when the token can be transferred. They can say like, oh, it can't be transferred at all. It can only be transferred on Tuesdays. These people can transfer, but these can't. So it's very useful if you're someone where you're starting off with something that's more like a loyalty program or something that has all these restrictions, but there's also hooks and functionality that you can transition your closed loop token into something that is fully open and is used like a fully decentralized ordinary crypto token. And this can be a very good journey where it's like you start off with something that has these tight controls and you're controlling and you're making sure that things are working well. And then you bring in the decentralization when you want the governance of the broader supply or access to the liquidity out there, any of these sorts of things. So yeah, I think like this is one of the adventures of building a developer platform that allows you to build these decentralized products is you have to figure out like when do you want this and when do you not, and when you always start centralized, what does that transition look like and how can we help people with it?
So I'm quite curious about Sui's next step about the technology. So would you mind explain or share something you can share about what next on Sui's technology?
Yeah, so I think we covered a lot of these. So definitely Walrus is like the next thing that we're very excited about. I talked a little bit about the Move registry. I talked about Mystiko-static V2. Something that we're working a lot on and that I think is important, but we haven't spoken, but that I haven't mentioned here yet is there's this concept of local fee market. So people talk a lot about like, my blockchain could do 100,000 TPS or like 10 million or whatever the number is. But like that's the number you get when someone hands you a workload that has tons of inherent parallelism, like nobody is touching the same objects at the same state and you're sort of off to the races. And we know that the way blockchain use cases work it's exactly the opposite of that. Like you have single pieces of state, like a trading pool that's very hot or a liquidation that someone wants to hit or like an NFT mint that's really going off right now. And so the thing that matters both for your throughput and for your latency performance is not, what's that chest beating number under ideal circumstances. It's when things start to line up and there's fundamentally more demand to touch one piece of state than your network can handle, then what happens next? And so we've been working a lot on that problem, how to have these object-based local fee markets where there's one trading pool that's very hot, and yes, there's lots of transactions lining up for that. The performance in that is going to degrade. It has to, because like if you can do 5,000 TPS on that object, but there's 10,000 people that want to use it, there's nothing else you can do. The thing you can do is you can make sure that for everybody else who's not touching that, their transactions still complete very quickly. The network still has very high throughput there. So we're playing a lot with what's the right gas fee model to let people say they want to jump to the front of the line for this object, but have gas fees be low elsewhere. How can we defer transactions that are waiting so that people can resubmit with the higher price? How can we have the network fee revenue like flow to the stakers instead of to searchers and MEV folks who aren't aligned with the network trying to capture it in this set of problems? And I think this has already been very interesting. And I think we have these changes like SIP45 that are just rolling out, changing the way these elements work. And we're doing a lot of staring at the data and sort of seeing how these designs are working out. So that's something we have more ideas along these lines that are coming out in the next few months.
Wow, amazing. So, now we came to the final part of our interviews. We want to know, something more about you. Through your journey from first place, I would say, in Facebook and all the way to now as a CTO and co-founder of Mysten Lab, what inspired you the most? Is there any people, books, or experience you have that shape your thoughts towards technology, towards blockchain, and towards your life? And because I need to quote from the AI again, right? So the AI told me that during Facebook, you were given a secret mission, which you need to spark a language for Libra. So because you were told that this project's mission is to make financial inclusion real. So that's how you are really impressed and be part of it. So some moment like this, could you share a little bit like the people, experience, or books?
So I think it's been mostly people for me. So I've had amazing technical and career mentors. So I'll mention two people in particular. So my grad school advisor, who's a guy named Evan Chang, not to be confused with Evan Chang, a CEO of Mysten Labs, although he's a great mentor too. He was the one who got me into research and programming languages and just sort of, I think instilled this way of thinking where he used to say this thing where it's like programming languages are like the core competence of computer science. Like computer science is all about abstraction. Like the thing that distinguishes computer science from the natural sciences is that you can have these nice abstractions that hide details and those just work, whereas natural sciences are just messy and they're the way that they are, so you can't change them. Whereas with computer science, we can build these towers of like, you have bits down, you have gates and bits down here, and now you have some bytes, and now there's like a string that wraps those bytes, and now I've got like a URL that wraps the string, and now I've got, all of a sudden I'm programming with the web server, and then I've got an AI model, and I'm like telling it what to do, and it does things. So like these towering abstractions that just build on each other and work and stay sane is like what computer science is all about. And programming languages are the science of building good abstractions. So therefore, programming languages are the most important thing, and that's what you should work on. So I think he really got me excited about the field and like what it could do. And then at Facebook, I worked with a guy named Peter Ahern, who's one of the great researchers in the programming languages field, who just has really, really excellent design taste and problem selection taste, I would say. I think helped me navigate sort of like, okay, you're a researcher at a big company, and like, how can you do great fundamental work that's also having an impact on the company and its bottom line, and sort of do both of those things. And so I've worked with a lot of great people, like more than I can mention on this call, but those two definitely stand out.
Well, I think everybody's mentors is their, just like a North Star about their careers and all the philosophies. You always can find their shapes of the peoples. So some questions I want to ask for the builders. So I know last time I've in Shenzhen, I met a lot of builders in Sui, and I've heard a lot of people just said, I want to build on Sui. So do you have any messages for those builders who want to build on Sui, and could you give them some guide?
Yes, my message would be please do and get involved. It's a very social and I think open community. So a few of the ways to get involved are there's our Discord server that's very active, lots of technical support, technical discussions going on. There's forums.sui.io that's more for sort of long form questions, lots of good historical questions there. There's the Sui developer Telegram group, talk to a developer that or just DM me on Twitter and we can get you added to that. That's probably where I spend most of my time helping people. Also, I think there's just a lot of technical discussions, especially now about Sui at the protocol level or the app level, whatever else happening on X, on Twitter. So those are good to jump into. Increasingly, it's Sui's open source culture is improving, I think. So, just finding existing code, filing issues, contributing to other people's projects to get started. Yeah, I would just encourage people to get involved socially and ask questions, reach out to me, anyone on the Mysten team, on the Sui Foundation team. There's nothing we do that's more important than bringing new developers in and helping them get excited about Sui and get started. So yeah, I would really encourage people to try it out.
You know what? Actually, I need to quote from the AI again, right? So the AI said, Sam Blackshear is famous for super close with developers. So he usually tweets about their successful stories and the breakthrough they made, right? So could you explain to me how, the AI says super close. Do you organize, Zoom meeting with them, or how often you actually go to face-to-face gathering or meetups in San Francisco and other places in the world? How close? You guys?
Yeah, as close as I can. So certainly the big crypto conferences that I go to or our events like Sui Basecamp, the registration, I should do a plug for that. The registration just opened up. It's in Dubai at the beginning of May. That's a great place for Sui developers to join. We're also doing Sui
Share
Summit.
Us the link. We will list it on the show notes.
Absolutely will. They're doing that. And also a developer retreat called Sui Summit after ETH Denver. And, I'll go to KBW or to Token 2049 in Singapore. So I always try to meet up with developers there. But it's mostly just, you can reach the most people by being online and typing very fast. Lots of just supporting people one-on-one in groups. I'll talk to someone, they'll refer me to someone else. I'll answer a question for them or chat through something with them. I think it's just, it's all about figuring out this is how do you use your time effectively to help people who really need help are going to take your energy and build it into something bigger versus just answering questions that AI can answer. And so that's what I really try to do. Is not that we don't love AI, not that we don't love AI too. It's great. It automates parts of my job in general. I like that it said that. I think that's not a hallucination. I really do try to be close to developers.
Yeah. Cool. I just think Sui ecosystem is really helpful because I know some of our friends from the Sui team and they always organizing some learning camp so just to help even you don't have the tech background just like me, and they can say, William, just join us and I promise you can understand it.
Yeah.
So I just think, yeah.
That's great. I think it's a very friendly and welcoming group, the community as a whole. It's kind of marvelous to me because it's so big, how can it stay like that? But yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Sui, honestly.
Yes. So the last question for today's interview is about expectation of this year. So this is just beginning of 2025. So what excites you the most about Sui's future, especially in this year?
Yeah, so to give a big theme, I think at a high level of the utility of Sui is something like the number of interesting assets times the amount of like mind-blowing programmability that you can do. And I think like up to this point, we've focused a lot on the programmability part because we control that a lot more. And I think this is the year where we're really going to get a lot of interesting new assets that then supercharge that equation more. So of course, we've just gotten stablecoins at the end of last year. We've had, classic crypto tokens and meme tokens. But I think real world assets, I think assets that represent physical things like storage in the form of Walrus. I think like there's this Eco project that's doing really interesting account control mechanisms from Sui. I think like seeing that part of the ecosystem grow is really going to enhance what Sui developers can do and just make things more interesting as well.
Great. So thank you, Sam, to join us today. And I hope my audience learned a lot from you. And I think on the last episodes, if you guys do have some confusing about the numbers and why the Swiss can get those high numbers and beautiful numbers, I hope you get answers from these episodes and from Sam's answer. And if you guys have any questions, please leave your comments under our episodes. And I promise you, I will post to Sam and hopefully Sam can answer your question. Okay, so I'll list the link that Sam just mentioned about the Swiss camp in Dubai, I think, and some links that Sam just mentioned. And thank you so much for joining us today, Sam.
Well,
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Hope you did. Great.
Okay, so
that's all for today. Thank you very much, Sam, and I'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.
The gypsy style brings me a smile. Oh, how that swing taught me to sing makes my life worthwhile. How that music gets me high, brings tears to my eyes. My hips are swaying side to side, my lungs they holler high. It brings the people out tonight. I need that swinging